Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Natalie and this is Clarified. Okay, so I want to jump right into my immigration story. This is not a recent story. This actually happened to me a really long time ago. So I'm from Greece originally, but my family, we came over to Canada when I was 8 years old. So this is not that immigration story. That immigration story was perfect. Smooth sailing, all went according to plan. Now, when I was 20 years old, however, I felt called by God to follow my fiance to England. So he was a dual citizen. He was both a British citizen and a Canadian citizen. And he went to England at some point during our engagement with the thought was for me to follow. So when he was in England and I was still in British Columbia, that's where I am currently living in Canada, BC, about an hour out of Vancouver. I remember, okay, I've got to figure out how to get there. Immigrating is a big deal. I had never done it as an adult. So about 9 months before him and I were going to get married, I looked up in the Yellow Pages the phone number for the British consulate office situated in Vancouver. I found their number, gave them a call, and a lady answered the phone. And so I told her the situation. I said, like, my fiance is British/Canadian. He is now back, he's in England. And I said, I am Canadian, Greek. I also have dual citizenship, but not British. And I said, I'm gonna go to England. So what do I need to do to get there legally? Like, because I assumed I would have to do a bunch of paperwork because that's usually what you do. And so she goes, oh, no. Greece is part of the European Union. You're an EU member. Just come on over. And I remember thinking, my first instinct, like, when you have the instinct just kick in, and I thought, ooh, that seems way too easy. And I said to her, the thing is my passport doesn't say Greece on it. This is where it gets complicated. I said, my passport just says Cyprus on it, but I am Greek. I was born and raised in Greece. And I'm Greek Cypriot because that is what my parents told me. They're like, you're Greek Cypriot. So I tell her the same thing. I say, I'm Greek Cypriot, but my passport just says Cyprus. And she goes, but you were born in Greece, right? Because I had just said that to her. And I said, yeah. And she's like, yeah, so you're Greek and Greeks can go to any EU country. You don't need a visa if you're part of the EU. And so, and I did like kind of know that, but I still didn't fully believe her. So I pushed it a little more and I said, okay, so even though my passport doesn't say anything about Greece and it just says Cyprus, I can still go with no visa, no paperwork of any kind. And she's like, that's right, because you're an EU member. So after 3 assurances, and part of it was I kind of wanted the out. I was like, I don't want to do a ton of paperwork. She's just emphatically told me that I don't need to do a ton of paperwork. So I said, oh, okay, thanks. Click, hang up the phone. And, my next thought was, well, she is a professional, she is hired by the British Embassy. Like, she would know the law. Like, if anyone should know the law between me and her, it should be her. So, she reassured me, just come on over. You're an EU member country. You're part of the club. So I thought, okay, this is great. No paperwork, yay. No visa, no application. So 9 months goes by, to fast forward you onto the scene now. And my flight is leaving YVR. And I eventually touched down at Heathrow Airport in London. So I'm going through, following the crowd. And I get to the part where there's the little like booth, or not booth, but it's like a desk. And I can hear the guy, I'm a few back in the line, and he's asking everyone, business or pleasure, business or pleasure, business or pleasure. And everyone is saying like holiday, holiday, business, business, holiday. Everyone's just answering. And so I know I'm not going there for business or pleasure. I am immigrating. So it's my turn. So I step on up and he goes like business or pleasure. And I say neither. And he goes, oh, why are you here? And I said, I'm moving here. And he said, oh, okay, where's your visa? Or show me your visa. And I said, oh, I don't have one. I don't need one. I'm a Greek citizen. And he just looks up at me and he's like, excuse me? And I said, yeah, I don't need a visa. I'm Greek. I'm part of the EU and I was told that I don't need a visa. And he's like, you need a visa to be in this country. He's like, you need a visa. And he calls some security person and they shuffle me out of the lineup. and flip open my one suitcase, and I had a wedding dress too in that special zip up thing. Flip open my one suitcase, rifle through everything, close it back up, and then get another security person to escort me further away from the crowds. And I'm brought to, I guess like a holding room or a detention, like a micro detention facility of some kind. It's just a room in an airport. It's like the size of a bedroom. And so I go there. I don't think I had my suitcase at this point or my wedding dress, and I just have to wait. So it's just a place to detain you till they can figure out what to do with you. So I get put in the room with only other illegals there as well. Now, before I forget this, so before they took me to that room, someone had told me, one of the British officials at the airport, they said, there's a flight going back to Vancouver in 2 hours. And they said, you're going to be on it. Like, you're going to be on it. You came here illegally. You will be on the flight in 2 hours. Back you go. So I was supposed to be getting married in 3 weeks. And this was incredibly stressful, okay? Try and put yourself in this situation. You're going to have a wedding. You're supposed to be immigrating countries. And someone's telling you in 120 minutes, you're going to be going right back home on the next flight. So I wasn't too happy. And I was a really new Christian. I had not even read the whole Bible yet. I had read significant chunks, but not the whole Bible. And so I didn't know any scripture verse for this situation. Like, when you're panicked, you're supposed to think of a Bible verse. It's supposed to be like the anchor. I didn't know what happens when you enter a country illegally through no fault of your own, because someone didn't know their job apparently, and now someone's threatening to boot you out. So I didn't know what the scripture was for that. So I thought, okay, I'm just gonna say a true thing in my head. And okay, it's not scripture, but at least it's true. So in my head, as I'm sitting in this little detention or holding facility, I start to tell myself over and over and over, like a mantra, God is bigger than immigration. 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 And I would say 12 or 15 minutes passed, and I was just saying this on a loop in my head, because honestly, it was the only thing that was keeping me from spiraling, from absolutely having an emotional meltdown. So I was partially saying it to contain my emotions, because this was very unplanned. This was very stressful. And a funny thing happened. So I was like waiting there for a while, and you get antsy waiting, and there's only one way in or out. There's a door, and there's a guy standing at the door, and I go on to join him and just stand right at the door, because I'm hoping I'll see someone come back for me. And he wants to make conversation, so he says to me in like the thickest African accent I've ever heard. And I say African because I don't know what country from Africa he was from, but really thick accent. He says, "What's your problem?" And it sounded very aggressive as well, just because of his accent, not that he was aggressive. And of course, if you come from Canada or the USA, if you ask someone what their problem is, you don't care about what their problem is. Them fighting words, right? If someone says like, "What's your problem?" they're trying to get up in your business. They're trying to cause a fight. So, he says to me, "What's your problem?" And I was like so shocked. And I thought, wow, this guy's so rude. I'm a total stranger. I've not been mean to him. I've done nothing to offend him. And he wants to pick a fight with me. And I was so confused. And I just kind of said, nothing. I don't have a problem. And he goes, "If you did not have a problem, you would not be here." And it just kind of dawned on me in that moment, that phrase lost in translation, it dawned on me that he actually really wanted to know what my problem was, that where he comes from, asking someone, "What's your problem?" is a question, not trying to start a fight. So I was like, oh, okay. And I said, yeah, my problem. I said, well, my problem is I'm here illegally because someone in the British embassy gave me the wrong information. So I just always thought it was a really funny moment, just because I took it completely the wrong way until I realized oh, that's just a legitimate question. So anyways, I continue to wait and wait. And then finally someone comes and takes me to a much smaller room. I would say something like about the size of a closet, like half of or a quarter of a walk-in closet, like a really tiny room with a desk and a chair. And then I'm grilled with a bunch of questions. Like, why did you come into this country? How long are you planning to stay? Why didn't you get a visa? And so I tell the person in charge, I said, look, I called 9 months ago. I called your embassy in Vancouver. I said, what do I need to do? And I said, the lady assured me that because I am Greek, that I didn't need no visa. And the person talking to me says, you're not Greek, you're Cypriot. And I said, no, I'm Greek. I am Greek. I was born and raised in Greece, and we left Greece when I was 8 years old. And she's like, no, you're not a Greek. And so there was a confusion, and she goes, here, like, let me bottom line this for you. She goes, I get it, you're Greek. I do understand that. She goes, but legally, she said, a person is what their passport is. She's like, it doesn't matter what country you were born in. You are by law what your passport is. So if your passport says Cypriot, it doesn't matter if you've never been to Cyprus in your life. You are a Cypriot citizen. I was like, oh. But, you know, I said, well, shouldn't the person who told me to come on over, you know, shouldn't they have known that? I said, isn't this their fault? I said, I actually talked to a lady and I asked her over and over, are you sure? And she assured me. And they said, oh, okay, could you tell us the name, first and last name of the person you spoke to? And I'm like, no, I never thought in my wildest dreams that someone in a government office would be so incompetent. You think as a 20-year-old, I thought I should jot down the first and last name. And they said, well, do you know the day you called, the hour you called? Because they wanted to track down this person to authenticate my story. And I said, all I can tell you, it was 9 months ago and it was a woman. That's it. Like, all I can tell you is the gender and the rough timeline. I'm like, I did not think at that point in my life to start recording names, jotting down dates, who I spoke to. So they're like, okay, hang on. They leave the room, come back. And, you know, obviously they can't track down the individual. But they say to me, look, you know what, like, we're sorry this has happened to you, but, you know, like, you're here illegally. And they said, we're gonna, like, release you to your fiance, like he was somewhere in the airport. And they said, but you're gonna have to come back here, and very likely you're gonna have to leave the country. Like, you probably can't even stay here to get married. They were just being honest with me. And I was like, okay. And so finally they do release me. I tell my fiance everything that's going down, and it's a mess. So the next day, I'm speaking to someone on the phone at the airport. I call them right away, and they said, here's what you have to do if you want to stay in England or get married or both. They said, you need to obtain a Greek passport or get some legal document from the Greek embassy that says they are processing a passport and that it's coming. And they said, and if that doesn't work, you need to get a Dutch passport, because half my family is from Holland. You need to get a Dutch passport or some legal document from the Dutch embassy saying that they are working on a passport for you, kind of like a promissory note or something. So I'm like, okay, sounds good. So I'm like, at least there's a plan in effect. So the very next day or day of, the first people I call are the Greeks, because I am Greek. I mean, maybe not legally, but I am Greek. I was born and raised in Greece. It's my culture, my home country, my bloodline. Like, this is true. I am Greek. So we are a Greek family, and I will get into the whole debacle with Cyprus. Anyway, so I phone Greece, and I'm like, hi, yeah, I'm Greek. I'm a Greek, like, I don't know if I said Greek citizen. I said, I'm Greek, Canadian. I said, I'm in England right now. I have unfortunately landed here illegally because someone gave me the wrong information, and I must obtain a Greek passport or just a note that says it's in the works. And the guy says to me without even thinking, he's like, no. And I'm like, whoa, what do you mean no? I said, I was born and raised in Greece. I am Greek. This is a formality. And he said, no, that's not it. He said, we don't consider Greece and Cyprus to be different. We consider it the same. And I was like, well, it's not the same. Cyprus is its own country. And he's like, yeah, but we consider it the same. And I was like, okay, well, but legally it is a separate country. And he's like, yeah, but for us, if we gave you a Greek passport and you already have a Cypriot one, it's like a duplicate. And I thought, am I losing my mind? What is it with these government officials? And so he's like, no, we're just not going to do it. It's like having a duplicate. Like, what do you do when government officials do not adhere to the law, basically, right? And so let me just briefly explain this whole issue, why I even have a Cypriot passport. So for those of you who don't know, Cyprus was a Greek island, just like Santorini, Crete, Corfu, Patmos. It was a Greek island. And somewhere in the 50s, I think, but I'm not sure, I'm not good with dates, but we'll say roughly in the 50s, Great Britain used to do a lot of military exercises on the Greek island of Cyprus because it was so close to the Middle East. And the British decided, hey, you know what? We would like to be on this island all the time, but we can't stay here if it is Greek. We can't stay here as long term as we want. So Britain declared that Cyprus is no longer a Greek island. It is a sovereign nation. So when they declared that, Cyprus essentially became a sovereign nation. So all the Greek people, and yes, they're Greek, they're now Cypriot. They're Cypriot. Do you understand? They're now just Cypriot. So the Greeks are kind of right. There is really no distinction between a Greek and a Cypriot other than a little bit of paperwork. But doesn't matter. The law is the law. So Cyprus has been an independent country, and Cyprus is not in the EU. They're not part of the European Union. Greece was. So had I had a Greek passport, I wouldn't have needed a visa or anything. But I had a Cypriot passport, as I kept telling her. And Cyprus was not, at that time, it is now, but at that time it was not part of the European Union. So just to explain that. Yeah, so a bunch of Greek people on the island of Cyprus suddenly became their own country. So that's how it happened. So we had family living on the Greek island of Cyprus. Now they became Cypriots, and now they were no longer Greeks, okay? So just to explain that. So the Greek official is like, no, we don't see any difference. Sorry. Like, so I know, one thing I know about my Greek people, we are unbelievably stubborn. We are like those donkeys we're so proud of. Like, we are a very stubborn people. It is a national trait. I'm not saying every Greek is stubborn. It's just one of those quirks. So I give up on him, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. I got Holland. Holland's got my back. They're such a tolerant nation. I'm sure they'll, give me a passport. So I look up the number for the Dutch consulate, and I give them a jingle. Tell them again the situation. I said, I absolutely need a Dutch passport, or a promise of a Dutch passport. And again, without even hesitation, the person's like, oh, sorry, no, you can't have one. And doesn't like even entertain the thought. And I was like, why is that? Why is that? I have a Dutch mother. Half my family's Dutch, And he tells me, he goes, well, you see, for Dutch parents, if they wanted their children to get Dutch passports from the year 19 whatever to the year 19 whatever, I don't remember the years he told me, he said there was a window where your mom could have applied for you to have a Dutch passport and Dutch citizenship. And he tells me in that window, she did not apply, and that window is gone. So he said, yeah, you can never be a Dutch citizen. And I'm like, okay, so there was just a window. My mom missed the window, and that's it. And he's like, yeah. Okay, great. So Greece said no, Holland said no, or the Netherlands, whatever, same country. So I was like, okay, everything's falling apart. So I go and I tell my soon-to-be mother-in-law, and I said, so Greece said no, Holland said no. And she looks at me, and she looks at my fiance, her son, and her husband, and she goes, well, I only know one person who can do miracles. So she said, let's all pray that you can stay in this country and you guys can get married. So we're around like the dining room table, and we all clasp hands and we pray, and mostly like her and my future father-in-law pray. So we all pray, amen. And the next day I wake up early. We're staying at their house. I wake up early and I go to prayer. And like I said, I'm quite new in my faith, and I start to pray about the situation, and God speaks to me. And I'm not like claiming God speaks to me all the time, but like he definitely spoke to me and I heard him very clearly. And he said, this is a faith issue. And he said it repetitively. He said it like 4 or 5 times, maybe 6. Like I heard it again and again in my head. And I was so amazed about this. I was like, oh, like, okay, if this is a faith issue, then basically, so long as I have faith, I'm going to get through this. Because why would God tell me it's a faith issue? He didn't say this is a legal issue. He didn't say this is an immigration issue. He didn't say this is a sin issue. Like he said, this is a faith issue. So I was like, okay, I need to have faith. And I did. Like from that moment onwards, from that moment, I believed God. I actually believed him. I did not doubt. From that moment, I knew some way, somehow, God was going to keep me in England. So about a day or 2 passes, and I was hanging out with my then fiance, and his mom and dad were watching TV, still waiting, praying, and there's a phone call. And my mother, or soon to be mother-in-law, she calls me in the next room. She's like, no, come here. And she goes, it's someone from Heathrow, and they want to talk to you specifically. They didn't ask for my fiance, they asked for me. And I was like, oh, okay. And I pick up the phone, I'm like, hello? And there's a guy on the phone, his name was Mr. Jones. I'll never forget that because it's a very generic name, like the soda, Jones soda. Anyways, so his name is Mr. Jones. He's like, hello, I'm Mr. Jones. And I said, oh, hi. And like, I didn't know why he was calling. And he said, I have had your file on my desk. I've been looking at your case. And he said, I want to meet with you and your fiance. I'm going to need you guys to come down to Heathrow. And he gives like a day and a time. And sorry, I have a bit of a cold. He's like, give you a day and a time and we'll do an interview process and determine whether or not, you know, you can stay at least long enough to get married. So I was like, oh, okay, sure, great. And he tells me, and this is a key phrase, he said, I'm going outside of the rules for you. And so I said, oh, thank you. Like, you know, because like if someone says that in a position of authority, you better be grateful, right? So I was like, oh, thank you. And then he continues talking a little. He's like, make sure you're on time, go to this area of the airport. And he says, and just so you know, I'm going outside the rules for you. And I said, yes, thank you. I like thanked him again. And we talked a little more. And then he said it a 3rd time. He said, I am going outside the rules. And I was like, yes, yes. And every time I said, oh yeah, thank you. So like, thank you. I could not stop thanking him. And I just found that interesting. He kept repeating the phrase going outside the rules. So basically he's saying like, I am breaking the rules for you two. So get off the phone and I'm just like, oh, like just stunned. And I tell the family, I'm like, there's a guy at Heathrow, Mr. Jones. He said, there's a file on us. It was on his desk. He came across, he read it. He was interested. He said he's going to meet us and interview us. So we get ready, we buy the bus tickets to go all the way, because we were in Gloucestershire and busing to Heathrow was 3.5 hours by bus. So we hoof it up, me and my fiance, we go all the way back up to Heathrow. And now this is where they play the dating game. They separate us into 2 different rooms and they just ask a lot of pointed questions about our relationship. When we met, how we met, how long we dated, how long was our engagement, why we determined to come to England, like all these questions. And I guess at the end of it, they were gonna see if they matched up, I'm guessing. So I answer questions. My fiance is in a separate room and they're asking him, I guess, similar questions. He answers questions. So we finish that and then we wait. And then at some point we are told that they will grant us something like, I don't know if it was 3 weeks or 3 months. It was not more than 3 months. It was a tiny visa. And they said, you guys can get married. It's long enough for that, because our wedding was at this point, I think 7 or 8 days away. And we were still planning the wedding while this is all going on. So they're like, okay, you can get married, but you got to come here before this visa runs out and try and get another visa. And they told me, do not get a job without a working visa. If you earn 1 pence are like, instead of cents, they're pence. They're like, if we catch you earning 1 pence, if you work and you get a job illegally, they're like, we're going to kick you out of this country. Your head will spin. And I was like, you don't have to tell me twice not to work. No worries. I'm not gonna look for work. So anyways, we stay. we get married, and I don't want to get into all the miracles of immigration, because at every turn I was threatened, and I mean threatened at every turn, to be kicked out of England. Because when I first arrived, they put this stamp basically that is like illegal, illegal, illegal. So every time we went to Heathrow to deal with immigration, every time the same reaction. The person would look at my passport and be like, "Oh, you sit right there. We're calling the authorities. We're kicking you out of this country." And every time I'd be like, no, I've already been through this. Trust me, it wasn't my fault. And I'm here and they're like, yeah, sit down. Like, they did not believe me. The people would be calling people. And then eventually they'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, sorry about that. And then I ended up getting a 6 months visa, then a working visa, which was separate from the 6 month visa. Then I think a 1 year visa. And then after that, eventually I got a letter, because I was in England for 2.5 years. I eventually got a letter that said, hey, you know what? Not hey, I'm like being so Canadian here, but finally they said, if you stay another, I forget, a couple of years, they said, you have permission to become a subject of Her Royal Highness in her realm. And like, basically I was on track for full British citizen, but by that time, like, God had called us out of England. So I wanted to share this story because there's some really key takeaways. Like, if God calls you to something, it doesn't matter what it is, you'll succeed. If God calls you to something, no matter what it is, you will succeed. You will not fail if God was the one who decided it. Now, if you decide it, you will probably fail for sure. I didn't decide to go to England. And even though someone in the British consulate told me the completely wrong information, I mean, I didn't just get to England. I got there raising every legal red flag. I got there completely illegally through no fault of my own, but still completely illegally. It was still no match for God. God fought for me at every turn, every hoop I jumped through, every bar I crossed. And that wasn't because I'm just like, ooh, I just have a way to charm all these officials. I don't. I don't. Trust me, I don't. The reason no one was able to boot me out of England is because God had ordained for me to go to England. So look, if God has told you to do something, do it. Do it. Don't be afraid. If God has called you to something, go for it. If it comes from God, it will succeed. If you take control of your own life, it will likely fail. If you're following God's leading, success. If you follow your leading, failure. If God has spoken to you, believe him. God does not lie. If he has spoken to you, believe him, trust him. He will make it work. He will make it work. He will not fail you. If it's his will, it's going to happen. So I just want to leave you with that. God bless you. My name is Natalie, and this has been Clarified.